Yes. Since I've been talking a little bit, I'm going to show a video. Now, if you haven't realized it yet, in the exhibition out there, there are 4 monitors on the wall. And they're cycling through a number of mix of virtual sculpture animations that I've been making pretty much since 1993. Also some process things. There's headphones there so you can listen in. So some of the things I'm going to show you, you can actually later on go and check them out again on your own. A lot of this stuff is also available at my website, which I'll be sharing a little bit later. But this is a video. It's only 20 minutes long, so I figure like it covers a lot of ground. It sort of picks up where I left off a bit. And it shows visuals, and then I'll have a lot more stuff to show depending on our time. Hello, my name is Robert Michael Smith. I'm a digital sculptor, and I've been asked to discuss with you today the future of design. So although I've been a sculptor and designer for well over 50 years now, it's really been the past 35 years that I've been actively engaged in digital design. And it was a real game changer. I would describe it as like moving from a handheld motor scooter to a very fast fighter jet in terms of the speed of how you get your ideas out, and then also how you manufacture, you produce your product directly through digital processes as well. I'm going to be showing you a lot of the first work that I began doing more than 30 years ago. And it was using design print first, and then the three-dimensional forms that were used eventually became the sculptures. And the sculptures also then evolved into virtual reality. The original images were printed on canvas, large G-clay prints, and virtual worlds were created. Early examples of worlds built specifically for virtual reality, and also synthetic biology, Freudian Jungian creatures. Also a series of prints of the wireframes of the three-dimensional forms. These functioned as prints on their own, but eventually all were shown together. And this was an exhibition in my Brooklyn studio, and you see 3 marble sculptures which were originally carved directly from the digital files into marble. There's a number of rapid prototype pieces that are on the shelves, and there's one of the large prints on canvas of a similar form. And these are a number of very early examples of gypsum prints. It's one of the first printers that I used about 25 years ago. It was called a Z-Core printer. That company has since been bought out by Stratasys. And then I started using the Stratasys Dimension to use ABS plastic and continuing this synthetic biology, also Freudian Jungian symbology, using traditional craft techniques such as gold leafing right on the ABS plastic forms, even silver paints. Some of these pieces then were given to craftsmen in China, and they were carved in stone, but also wood, as some of these. This is the piece that was shown earlier that was carved directly on a 3-axis milling machine back in about 2003. that was at 2 feet. Now this is the same form, but carved out in foam at about 6 feet in length. And this piece then has a polyurethane skin sprayed on, and this is located currently in front of Public Library in White Plains, New York. Another piece that was cut by milling machine in foam and then with a polyurethane skin sprayed on. I started working in China, and this is a black granite piece that was carved in the south of China near Xiamen. White granite from the same area, red granite from the same area of China. And this is a piece from the Digital Stone Project, which was exhibited in China in 2008 to 2009 at 4 venues. This is in the center of Chongqing. That's the Yangtze River in the background.
On the technology front, we've never had more ability to use computers to advance the idea of design, to give people more tools to understand what they're doing, to visualize the things, to simulate, to analyze. It's all part of a direction to, give people better tools to experience the things they're going to build before they actually build them.
The ability with a computer to try things, move things, change them, duplicate the shapes, move them around without worrying about gravity, without worrying about gluing them, without worrying about cutting shapes, was really a revelation. It's freedom.
Then once I've found the shape and the forms that I'm looking for, and I have the beauty and the intensity and the brilliance that I'm looking for in the work, then I'm able to send that file out to the rapid prototype printer, and then within another couple of days or so, I have a beautiful finished physical model.
It's a challenge, and it's an exciting challenge. This certainly couldn't have been possible when I started thinking about these things 40 years ago. I wouldn't have imagined that you could make a representation of something so complex as this.
I started working in stone because the material brought forward a permanency that I couldn't find in other materials I was working with.
And I think the definition on the line on this one is working a lot better. It's just bringing the hand back in.
For me, the sculpture is like making poetry with shape.
The exhibition in China also did go to Shanghai, as in this image. You've just seen some of these granite pieces in the video clip we just watched. But I also began to work in Vietnam, just as lots of Chinese companies go down to Vietnam for lower cost manufacture. I found that marble carvers in Vietnam were significantly lower than even the prices for workers in the south of China. And the work I was very pleased with, but I also continued to work in Italy, and this is the Carrara Mountains, some of the most famous marble quarries in the world. They've been quarrying out of these since ancient Rome and continue today. But this is where the real future, of course, lies with all new design and manufacture, is robots. This is a 7-axis robot. It's a rather large and expensive robot, but it's capable of reaching down and under and around into undercuts that a 3-axis CNC milling machine was never able to do. So I was able to start carving much more complex forms, such as this was the first piece that I did in Italy. In the second year, I produced this piece. In the third year, I produced this sculpture, which is on exhibition at the Villa Strozzi in Florence, with hard carving at the bottom that looks more like original traditional carving that Michelangelo himself would have done. There's a lot of references to his slave series in this. But later, this sculpture you will see was included in a new location at a much larger scale in China, but that's will come later. Now, this sculpture, this is a 3D print, was actually designed first in virtual reality. And this kind of design, haptically, in virtual reality, then 3D printed, or in this case also enlarged and cut by a 7-axis robot. I'm only doing the final surface working here. Eventually, robots will be sophisticated enough to even do that fine work. It's just very expensive now, but like all technology, those costs are being driven down significantly. This is one of the most recent pieces I did 2 years ago before the virus stopped us from going to Italy for the last couple of years, just as it stopped me from going to China for the last year and a half. But you'll see that I'm continuing to play with the synthetic biology. And this was also cut by robot, but this was carved on a 7-axis robot that was located in Long Island, Queens, USA. So the technology is now expanding. I'm sure that there are places in the south of China that also have this kind of equipment. Originally, I had been a metal caster and had gotten into digital technologies because I wanted to create a foundry of the 21st century. But all the other developments in virtual reality and in stone carving and synthetic biology sort of pulled me away for a while, but I was able to get back into doing some stainless steel casting, which was a first for me after having been a bronze caster and aluminum and iron caster for many decades. These races were all produced in Beijing with the help of very good friend Wang Xingong, who's at Beijing Capital Normal University. I also did a 3D biosculpture print. There is a long video that you can find online to see more information about it, but essentially I 3D printed living cells into a form. Now, that form went into a 3D printed exoskeleton, but the 3D printed sculpture only lived for about a month before the cells died. And so I made a reliquary, which in Western culture is similar to a a Chinese tomb, but it's simply for putting on display a body part. But I continued design into this idea of biological forms, and these sculptures really are endoskeletons for future synthetic biology. This could be a kind of a sea star kind of character. I have exhibited the virtual reality in tandem with the 3D prints, but whereas the 3D prints is a small model, in virtual reality you can see the sculptures at the height that I really see them meant to be, which is 40 or 50 feet in height. Now, the future of robotics is small robots. And we have been working with a group called Haddington Robots that has a surgically precise robotic arm. It's about the size of a human arm, and it costs under $10,000, which is a huge drop in price from those large 7-axis robotic carving machines, which cost upwards over $500,000. So eventually we'll have armies of these, and just simply recreating our hand-eye skills. We use motion capture to program these, but we also wanted to take it a step further. With my colleague, Alexander Vasiliev, when we were at New York Institute of Technology, we got a grant to build a low-cost bioprinter, 3D bioprinter. It's actually a 4D bioprinter because the cells grow over longer periods of time in a matrix. And this is the system that we created. So if you want to know where the future is going, we're all going to be designing and hacking synthetic biology. Now, I have also extrapolated these ideas to larger sustainability. And these are designs for future buildings with one of my sculptures out front. And in the interiors are also sculptural forms. So the idea is like Kurt Schwitter's Merzbau. We live inside of our sculptures. We do everything, all of our daily routines inside of our art. Now, I told you that there was a sculpture earlier that was in Italy that then was commissioned to be enlarged, and this is probably the largest sculpture that I've had produced to date. This is over 10 feet in height, over 3 meters, and it is now located in a new economic zone area in the center of the new area of Nanning, China. And I also had the largest 3D print made in the south of China for an exhibition on the beach in Shenzhen, China. And this is walking around the sculpture. You see that the sculpture changes dramatically as you move around it in 360 degrees. And here I am with some of the top sculptors of China, contemporary sculptors. So it's a nice group to be in. It was a nice award that I got for this digital design. So I continue to design with the idea that pieces will be fabricated in lightweight materials with metallic skins and hung from ceilings, and also including an LCD grid in the background that will have more the sense of what this looks like when I'm working in a three-dimensional world. I want my audience to see what I see. I also recently had twin sons, and about 1.5 years ago, when my wife was still pregnant, I started designing a series of sculptures that were based on the idea of twins in uterus. And I recently was in an exhibition in France, an online exhibition, but they did do a 3D print with a color printer. And this was the most recent piece that I had done. And 3D printing was something that we've had for a while, but it hasn't been as advanced as we'd like. So this was a big leap for me also. And I want to thank you for joining me today. And as I move off into the future, as you do, through a series of new dimensions, you're welcome to contact me at this email address, and you're more than welcome to view more of my art and more videos and lectures at this URL. Thank you for your attention today. So, I think that video sort of picked up where I left off in the conversation. One of the things that I hadn't mentioned, when Steve Jobs made that prediction, not only was he right about technology, but I didn't know it, that it was actually predicting some of my own personal future. When he mentioned that TIE fighter scene that was in the first George Lucas Star Wars film, I didn't know that that's also where I was going to be employed several decades later. But I was. In fact, one of my former colleagues, our historian, William Gannis, who teaches at one of the state universities here in Indiana and Terre Haute, also used to write a great deal about digital sculpture. We used to get a lot of press back in the day, but also I just was in a good position because I ran the website, or the first website for the International Sculpture Center from the mid-90s, early 2000s. Then I was on the board of directors for a few years. Ran most of the tech workshops at their conferences. So that sort of puts you in a position where you can start making sure your history is safe. Until I discovered, just in the last couple of years, that they deleted almost all of the stuff that we had posted without any warning. And actually, there was other arts institutions that did the same thing, claiming that there's not enough storage. I don't know about you, but I know how cheap the cloud is for storage, so it's a bullshit excuse. It's more like the sci-fi stories about, it's like 1984, I think, if you want to change history, you just simply erase it, and then you make a whole new history. So there's people now that New York Times is talking about as being the guys who made digital sculpture happen. I can tell you, I was one of the guys who was actually in the room and they weren't there. So I'm doing a video series now documenting the history of digital sculpture to really sort of close all those doors. And this time I won't put it at sites where they can just erase it at will. Lessons learned the hard way about the art world. Now, I don't know how much time, I have so much data I can show you, but I really promised, and this is even just more for me, because this piece is so new, I only saw it completed obviously I've seen it in development for the last 2 months. But it finally came together as a complete piece. I saw it this morning. This is the first public premiere, and it's based on earlier earlier 3D sculpture, virtual sculpture animations, which you can see in the hallway out here in the gallery. And you can listen to the original soundtracks, and you should. Because the musician I work with is really a damn good rock musician. He's a drummer from Toronto named Dan Cornelius. He's had some good bands already out there. But we've been talking about the future thing, which was sort of like Peter Gabriel started playing with this about 20 years ago. When DVDs first came out, the idea was we're going to create albums that also have visuals. It was more like they were making music videos to go with albums. But we're sort of running on this premise that, well, what if you made Dark Side of the Moon and you made the visuals and the sound together? Or you work in tandem. Now, I have to admit that I still do the visuals first, and then he steps in and does the soundtracks. But it all happens in a very short period of time. And I give him a lot of freedom. I tell him, throw in a little this and a little that, and, but ultimately, he does his own thing. But we have a third collaborator in this one because it is AI. And AI is just simply another piece of software. If anybody's telling you that AI exists, it's not factually true. There are programs that they sell to you that are called AI, and they are really damn good databases. They're very fast, and they're getting better and better all the time. But when they tell you that they're learning, well, they're mathematically able to work through a lot of permutations, and they start working out solutions. But they don't do anything you don't ask them to do. But they will spit out things you weren't expecting. But in the end of the day, we're the creators. We're the editors. We make the final decisions. The art directors make the final decisions. And art is all about editing. It's about intent, and it's about creative juice. And also it's made by humans, and Kant will certainly lay that out as the construct of the human mind. In fact, he puts fine artists, which he includes as visual artists, musicians, well, not musicians, but composers, and writers, more like fictional writers. Those who create something from nothing. Now, we're all armed with a certain biology that gives us a biological imperative. And yes, Freud was right. 95% of everything that motivates us is sexually based. Whether anybody feels comfortable with that or not, it just happens to be a fact that a man that came out and told us this in the Victorian age, over 100 plus years ago, it transformed art, but it also was ameliorated by my next favorite guy is Carl Jung. And Carl Jung said, Freud's right. 95% of it is biologically based. But human beings have this 5% capability of transcendence. And that 5% is pretty important. And that's, again, where we come in. As artists, we bring in the transcendence. We're certainly going to be impacted by our biological imperative, but we also have the capability of bringing something more to the table. So I told you I spent a lot of time as a youth in and around Haight-Ashbury, and all the heavy rock music and all the other things that go along with all that. So I know something about trips. And what I know is they were a hell of a lot of fun. What I also know is they're a hell of a lot of fun until they're not. And then it can really just wreck you in terms of ever having fun with it again. So I've always been of this idea that, well, what if we built a trip, an electronic trip, that everybody can go on without any of the biological downsides? So I've been moving towards that. And if you look at the earlier virtual sculptures, I think you'll see some of that in there. But I really feel like we've hit something out, and I think this is the first of what may be an album. So, this is Psyops eros gnosis, which is not even easy for me to pronounce all the time. So I could be showing a lot more visuals, but I think that you've had a glut at this point. You got the physical stuff out there, you've got the history on those monitors. You had a live performance today, and now you've seen my latest creation, which is just the beginning of more of the same. I'll keep making sculptures, I'll keep making prints, I'll keep working with whatever new technologies come to the forefront. But I do want to say something about AI, as I mentioned a little earlier. And I've heard this week that some people are afraid of AI. As creative people, don't be afraid of the tool. That's like Michelangelo saying he's afraid of a chisel. Yeah, maybe this might seem to be a thinking chisel, but it's not. Will it become one? Yeah, it may be quicker than we all would like, but this still is not a guarantee that there's going to be a sentient life form that we're going to be dealing with. And if it's not sentient, it's not likely to be creative. It's just simply going to be a better and better and better tool. And it's going to need human minds to run it. But if you really want me to scare the shit out of you, you are AI. You are the future of AI. Long before we have the technology to actually create a sentient thing, if we can even do it. We don't even know what our own human consciousness is, let alone what AI is going to be. But we do know that we're getting closer and closer to the technology that we're inextricably linked to it. I don't know about you, I can't afford to lose this thing. I freak out if I don't even know where this is for about 5 minutes. But in somewhere between the next 5, 10, maybe 15 at the outside, probably sooner than we all would think, I won't need to hold this thing. I will just be thinking it. And once you are able to think it, you're communicating with it, you will be connected to the cloud. You will have direct linkage to AI. You will be directing AI by thought. Therefore, you will be AI. And I'll tell you the one thing I am really afraid of. There's a very long history of man's inhumanity in man. So human beings scare the shit out of me. Not AI, not machines, not tools. But, just like Jung points out, we have the capability of transcendence. Human beings also give me all of the joy, hope, and love of life. And this is what I love about art. It's human beings expressing themselves and showing me something from nothing. At least the better artists, anyway. So, I'm going to open up to question and answer period now, but I'll just leave it at that. Don't be afraid of things that don't exist. Be afraid of the things that do exist. There's a question in the back.
Thank you so much. It was really interesting to hear you talk about your work and to see some of it as well. One of the things that I was struck by, both when I was looking at the pieces outside and also with some of the stuff that you showed in here, is like a lot of visual references that made me think about fractals and you know, that these mathematical elements that appear in nature but can also be like constructed deliberately through working with algorithms and formulas and stuff like that. And I'm just curious, in your practice, like how much is the mathematical stuff like at the forefront of what you do, and how much of it is just kind of like built into the fact that you're working with digital tools and that kind of thing?
Well, I'm not a mathematician. And I don't even have that much interest in math, except as it relates to the history of human beings. And sacred geometry does have a very long history. I also study, I don't believe in religion, but I study comparative religions because I'm very, listen, it's all storytelling. We're storytellers. If we can't learn from all the storytelling that went on in the past, then we can't really be very good at what we do. Otherwise, we're just going to be trying to reinvent the wheel all the time. So, sacred geometry is of great interest to me, just as where it appears archaeologically, and we find it even back in the cave. There are geometric patterns in very early humans, even newer versions of cavemen that show us that as well. But I spent a lot of time studying the Greeks, and of course the golden ratio. This should be one of the first things they teach you in art school, right? I bet you don't really know what it is. You know it's there. You know that they put that perspective in with their architecture and their sculptures and everything else. But it is an algorithm that if you follow it, is observable in nature, in trees, in plants, in coastlines. It's all there. Now, in the Renaissance, and a big part of the Renaissance is a rebirth of antiquity, a mathematician, scientist / artist, Fibonacci, refined that and came up with the Fibonacci sequence. And you've probably, if you go online, you'll see there's always the seashells cut in half, and there's always things like artichokes and broccoli. But it was only until 1996 that fractal geometry was really refined by Mandelbrot. The Mandelbrot just died recently, not too long ago. So we've been refining this. Now, what the number shows us is not just the relationships within nature itself. If you just let nature grow, if you let it evolve, it goes through these patterns. And you can track them geometrically. But now we're able to look so far back into space that we're getting closer and closer to the origins of the universe. So it's like we're looking back in time, and we see this unfolding on a cosmological scale. It's the same geometry. If we look at an electron microscope down to a certain level, we see also that geometry works. That fractals is just a refined Fibonacci, which is just refined golden ratio, which all emanates out of sacred geometry. So can we use it as a storytelling device? Yeah, that's how I use it. Quite honestly, I usually describe what I do as fucking with Fibonacci, which means that I don't have a lot of respect for math, but I do. I do and I don't, right? But I let the computer do all the calculations for me. But what I don't like is math art. Honestly, there's a lot of math art out there. A lot of mathematicians think they're artists, and it's like, well, yeah, I guess it kind of looks like art. But anybody with any training in aesthetics would go, but it's not very interesting. And it really has nothing to do with telling a story about human beings. Really doesn't get into the guts of the emotions or any of the rest of those important features of storytelling. So I would say that I pick up where that leaves off. I don't negate it entirely. I mean, listen, I could sit around and look at a fractal poster and go, oh, wow, man. But I ain't going to buy it. I'm not going to put it in the Museum of Modern Art and say it's representation of the best things that human beings can do. But it is a point where we start.
So you started your talk with Steve Jobs.
Well, now let's be honest. This was in a room full of people, and I had a couple of questions, and because my questions were so far off base, he actually answered them. But I wasn't in the room with the guy for more than half an hour. So I don't know him. I never really knew him. I was just in the same room with him asking some questions.
So I think I heard you right, is that you were talking like 17 years in the future. So if you were...
He said 15. That was 76. So that would have put us up to about 89, 90, which is exactly when I first started using computers. Not that I wasn't already anticipating them or already being influenced by them, because I did know two sculptors, Kenneth Nelson and Bruce Beasley, who were my mentors. I had access to their studio, so I saw what they were doing, and it was like, yeah, I want to do that. But it's like, I don't have $250,000. I'm not a blue chip sculptor. I was just a young guy, just with dreams of being a good sculptor. Listen, you know what it's like when you're hitchhiking in the 60s and some young kid gets in, hippie kid, and tells you he's going to be a great artist one day? It's, even I would go, ooh, this kid's been doing way too much shit now.
So I know that you kind of talked about utilizing AI as like a tool for your art, but I was wondering how you feel about people like putting a prompt into like an AI generator and then calling themselves an artist?
Well, listen, I kind of go along with, I think it was Andy Warhol that said anything an artist makes is art, and pretty much that anybody who calls himself an artist is an artist. So I think language is not always a lot of value, especially when it doesn't really tell you anything. My position on this is, if somebody comes in here and does whatever, and they tell me that it's art, I'm not going to argue that it's not art. That's the most ridiculous conversation you can ever get. Like, well, that's not art. Art is not a closed concept. It's a continually expanding concept. I've never closed any part of art. They didn't close the museum down because digital art came in. Oh, those Greek guys are right out of here now. that golden ratio stuff, that's kid stuff. Repeat the question, because sometimes the tapes in my head get farther away than I do.
So I was saying, I know that you utilize it as a tool in your work, but how do you feel about people who...
Oh, people who call themselves art. Yeah, again, I have one quote that I often use. It's like, the question is not whether it is art. The question is whether it is significant art. Now, who makes that determination? Significant art. Well, we have institutions that do that, but we also have ourselves. And any artist, I think art school is a great place to get a start on an art career. But all the really training you do is just how to research and to make stuff, and then you keep it going. Somehow you have to keep it going. Not too many people get their art careers started in art school. They get the basis of who they are as an artist started in art school. So now there is a piece that's at the Museum of Modern Art. That is the first big AI purchase by a major institution. So who am I to argue that it's not art? Am I impressed by it? Mildly. I find it a little compelling, but I sort of feel like if I was doing what he was doing, you would have only seen the bottom layer of this animation. I layered on other things. It's not analog because it's all technology. It's only a few decades old, but still, I'm layering in other tools because I don't think any one tool is enough. And if you let the chisel guide your hand, well, that's good chisel art, I guess. But I think that we have to be in control all the time. That intent is very important. That personal expression is very important. So I wouldn't argue that it's art. And I'm not going to get in argument with the collectors who all believe that this is something now very important. It's like, honestly, long before there was AI, they were buying a lot of shit that I'm looking at and going, wow, that's not how I'd spend my money. If I was that rich, you don't have to accept every fashion that comes out. You don't have to accept every image or every artist. And some people will go on and on about a certain individual like they're some kind of genius, and I'm looking at going, conceptual art, well, if that means you eliminate all of the other aspects of art and it's only about concept, well, doesn't that mean the concept's got to be really mind-blowing? And I'm looking at a lot of conceptual art, and I'm not seeing my mind's not getting blown a lot. Now, Robert Storrs, I was just at a presentation. He was one of the art critics that helped promote appropriation and conceptual art. And he was at this lecture to the School of Visual Arts in New York City, and some art student said, well, if appropriation is so good, then should I just start appropriating? And I actually thought it was a pretty fair question. If people are really promoting this to the point that everything else is supposedly fallow, except that Robert Storr said exactly the right thing. Because if you're a young, talented artist with lots of capabilities, my recommendation to you is that you just keep pushing that and not worrying about trying to catch up with a fad that's already decades old. And he says, despite the fact that I've been writing to promote this stuff, lately I've been thinking that maybe it was mistermed. Maybe it's inappropriation and misconceptualization. Now that's kind of been sticking with me the last few years, because it was like, yeah, I don't have a problem with conceptualism. I think conceptualism is the base. All art, even the cave, is conceptual art. It's all concept. But you add to it. You add your expression. Benedetto Croce is one of my favorite Italian critics from the early part of the 20th century. And he said that he was placing Kant's notion of the something from nothing, and he was saying that comes from intuition. Of course, he had the advantage of having to rely on the recent writings of Freud and Jung, that psychology became a very important part of aesthetics. And he said that it comes from intuition, but we all have intuition. Baby turtles and crocodiles have intuition at birth, and their first intuition is run as fast as they can, either to hide or get away from their parents, because their parents will literally eat them. Now, maybe we should all sort of take that as a lesson ourselves. But just having that connection, and one could say that it's a connection to this code. Now, you were talking earlier about mathematics. I do believe that life is mathematically coded. We have no doubt that it mathematically codes physical structure. But I also, one of those people who believes that there is a software over the top of that, and that would account for intuition. It would also account for that you're born with a certain amount of knowledge, whether you do anything or not. It's just there's that there. I do think artists are connected to some kind of universal truth. I think that I see it in the work of some of the artists who, throughout time, have appealed to me. Like, I feel like this person is talking about universals, even if they're talking about a private subject or something. But that connection, you don't choose that. Now, if you have it, you do have to exercise it, and you do have to manifest it. And that was his position, that it only becomes art once it's manifested. You have to physically make something. So you take the concept of something from nothing, and you make something physical. And then it's in the world, and then it's art. Or maybe it would be more important to say at that point, that would be a way of saying maybe it's significant art. Any other questions? Yes?
I have a couple.
Good.
So you're saying art is only art if it's manifested. What does that mean? Because, digital art is going to be there 1 second and can be gone the next second. Also, I come from a family of artists, and I've worked in a lot of museums, and I know collectors. So this is completely different than my first question, but do you do your work in editions? So like, do you have, 10 editions or something like that, or 10 pieces per edition?
Well, if what you're saying is that if something is around for a brief period of time, I actually don't know of any digital art that has not been created by a human being. In fact, I personally cannot recognize a single work of art that's ever been used, that's ever been manifested by a machine or anything else. I mean, yeah, I've heard elephants paint, but if they're trained to. But I don't think they have the intent to make art. I don't think they really give a shit whether anybody thinks it's art or not. So I think we have to be careful because this is part of the thing that I get a little funny when people talk about AI to me, as if somehow there's this thing that's going to start making art.
That's what AI is. You tell it something. Like, what if I told AI, I met this guy, and
well, what if you didn't tell an artist not to do something? Artists don't need to be told to do anything. So if you are giving, or somebody is giving a command to AI, that's humanity infusing their aesthetic choices. This thing won't function. It literally will do nothing unless a human being gives a command to it. So can it start generating mathematically a lot of things beyond what it looks like the original words were? Well, that's just part of mathematical permutations. That if you have an infinite number of possibilities, this thing will just keep cranking them out. But if a human being isn't there to say, hey, wait a minute, stop, oh, I like that. You know, oh, I know I really know that's garbage, you know, this is good. Human beings are art directors. You start making those choices, there's humanity involved in the creative process, there's intent. Maybe one day, but AI has to first pass the Turing test. I don't know if you know about the Turing test. Now, some people are saying the Turing test is going to be passed in less than 5 years, in a handful of years. My position is all that's going to prove is that AI can be like Schrodinger's cat. Whether he's in the box or not, he meows and we think he's there. Right? But I don't think that Schrodinger's cat is going to get into any dissertation on its own accord. Right? And I don't think that Schrodinger's cat is going to ask for a meal. So I think that we're getting close to the point that yes, AI can confuse us to thinking that it's human because we're training it enough to be a good simulacrum. But a simulacrum is just still, it's a copy. It's a false notion. You might as well go to Las Vegas and say, I'm going to go travel the world. I want to go see Italy and Egypt. And you can do it. I've been to all those places, and I've been to Las Vegas, and it's like, no, this is pretty much a real crappy reconstruction, but I can, it's all right in some ways. I guess for some people who never travel more than 30 miles in their life, maybe this is the only way they're going to see even close to the outside world. But no, I'm not convinced when people are telling me, first of all, that AI even exists. Supercomputers exist, and supercomputers are able to crunch an infinite number of numbers, and we can attach them to a cloud, and we can feed them so much data that they can start spitting back what appears to be a human conversation. But you still have to start that conversation. If you don't yell at Schrodinger's cat is not going to do anything. Schrodinger's cat is going to stay in the box and stay silent. And that's what AI is right now. Now, I'm not one of those guys who thinks he's got the answers forever. So ask me the same question 5 years from now, the same question 10 years from now, 15 years, and I will give you probably completely different answers. But I will tell you that there are some people out there who really know this stuff and have been tracking it pretty well for a long time. And I will make some recommendations. If you don't know who Ray Kurzweil is, I used to require his book to art graduate students. The one he wrote in 1999 called Age of the Spiritual Machines. And then he wrote in 2006, The Singularity is Near, to prove that everything he said in the first book was correct. He recently just came out, earlier this year, a book called The Singularity is Nearer. Because he was tracking what's going to happen in the electronic revolution for 100 years in 1999. We are 25 years in, and he has been, boom, spot on. And I would say that anybody who's looking at his pronouncements for the next 10, 15, 20 years, think like, well, it might not exactly be there, but nobody is saying it's not going to happen. It's like, well, some things can happen a little sooner, some a little, but he's the guy who's considered to be correct. Now, he talks a lot about this kind of stuff, even art. Now, he might be convinced that there's going to be an artist AI in the future. But I say, even following his own rationale, look at how long it took to evolve us. 14.5 billion years of the unfolding of a universe, the death and birth of stars over billions of years, the impossible balance at a quantum level of the universe we exist in. Again, if you really want to be scared, think about the fact you live in a universe that's not supposed to exist. That mathematically it's practically an impossibility. But in a world of all mathematical possibilities, the impossible does happen. And we're it. And it's only held together by the same impossible balances. So we could cease to exist in the next nanosecond just because that balance goes out and no one would even have a clue why. But it happens. So I always figured that I'm already winning the universal lotto every nanosecond of my existence. So how much worse would life be? Right? I mean, there's some existential threats out there. Like, ooh, I hope that doesn't happen. But for the most part, I'm feeling fairly hopeful. I want to keep creating. I want to keep talking to other human beings. I'd like to help other artists actually discover, yeah, there really is a possibility of a career. And you know what's really supplied that career more than anything else in the last several decades? Computer technology. There are more jobs out there for artists than there ever were. You know, so and you've got a tool that gives you the kind of power that no artist in the past ever had. They were working under much more difficult situations with a lot less opportunities. So you have this all at your fingertips. It's just a question of making that choice. You know, either you're going to do it or you're not going to do it. And the only one that actually even cares about stopping you is yourself. Nobody else cares enough, right? Did I answer all those questions?
Yes.
Even the subtext questions?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us here today, and good luck with your career, seriously.